Yes, I am. I'm reasonably happy with the results, both schools. William Edwards made some progress, and Gable Hall matched the results they had last year, which were the record results. We were hoping for slightly better, and we are going for one significant remark in English, which would give us about a 2 to 3% increase. So overall happy. I'm particularly delighted with the YourThurrock results overall. I think they've made a significant leap forward in terms of the 5 A to Cs with English and Maths in the secondary sector. And there's some outstanding results by certain schools.
Are you greatly encouraged, looking at it from a whole perspective, when you see, for example, Gray's School and the Gateway, they've got over that national challenge figure? Do you take pride in that as well, from a whole perspective?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. We're part of a team here in YourThurrock, and I know that every single school and every head teacher that I come across are fighting for the same cause in many respects. We want YourThurrock to be on the map for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. And I think that progress, as I mentioned earlier, by the secondary sector in particular this year has been very, very impressive. And now we're on very, very safe ground. And with Bellas Chase, or Ormiston Park as it is now, as a new academy, we're also convinced that that school will make significant inroads this year. So
here we are now in September 2009. What are the specific challenges here for this new year?
I think the challenges, some of those challenges remain constant. We are still having to ensure that those results are continuing on the upward trend. We must ensure this isn't just a blip in the right direction and then start falling back. So the progress that has been made, first of all, has to be sustained. That's a challenge in its own right, and of course has to be improved, which is an even greater challenge. And that against the backdrop, and a significant backdrop, of political uncertainty when it comes to funding. And that's something I think that we're all bracing ourselves for. Those of us, including now, of course, Gable Hall with the Stanford and Corringham Sixth Form Centre, are already beginning to feel the impact of some of those cutbacks with uncertainty in capital programmes, in building programmes, and of course that will affect not just us, but much more importantly perhaps the FEHE provision, which is planned for Gray's Town Centre, and we await literally in the next few days to see what that level of funding is going to be, if at all. Now that's clearly going to be matched also by funding cuts in the secondary sector. All political parties are rather cagey on this at the moment. When you try to get exact figures from them, of course they're most reluctant to offer those. It's a very, very sensitive issue. These frontline services, as they're called, in other words, education, national health, etc. In my view, they're all going to have to face some sort of cut. And what we're anticipating, and I think what we're generally planning for, is between a 5 and 7% cut. And that will make an impact, that will make a significant impact.
Some of the political parties have been chipping in, so to speak, regarding cuts in schools, saying that the cuts shouldn't happen at the bottom, so to speak, without disrespecting people's jobs, but have accused some schools of having non-jobs and talking about senior leadership teams, etc., etc. Is that a fair criticism?
I think it would probably have been a fair criticism 10 years ago, where it wasn't uncommon to come across senior leadership teams with people who were very, very close to retirement, had been promoted into senior leadership positions in order to enhance pension. That is no longer the case. I've come across more and more senior leadership teams now that are smaller, they're more efficient, and if there are any efficiencies to be made in schools, which there always have been despite the increase in funding, it generally tends to be at that level anyway. Because the one thing we need to safeguard, and I think any head teacher wants to safeguard, is teachers in the classroom. That means that we streamline as far as that's concerned, we streamline as far as the support staff are concerned, and the next major area is your own senior leadership team. And it's much more common these days that senior leadership teams are becoming smaller, they're taking on more, but they're becoming more efficient, and the cuts are being based at that level. So I don't think it's necessarily fair that there's dead wood as such. I've yet to come across a senior leadership team in all the schools I support where there's dead wood.
Going back to the results and looking forward to open evenings and open days, is what result, if I was a prospective parent, what results should I really be focusing on when it comes to Gable Hall School?
Well, I think there are a series of results actually, because it depends where your child is and where your child sits. You have to look at the overall headline figure, and whereas previously it was 5 A to Cs regardless of the subjects, the 5 A to Cs with English and mathematics is the most important figure these days. and to measure that against similar schools, comparable schools, national statistics, etc. So 5 ADCs with English and mathematics, I support that as being a benchmark figure because English and mathematics are desperately important subjects. And then after that start looking at other areas which are relevant to your own particular child. For example, if your child has special needs, look at the progress and the attainment of special needs children. If your child is represented by an ethnic minority group or falls into an ethnic minority grouping, look at that specific area and see how those children within that category progress at the school. So it's largely the overall figure of 5 ADCs with English and mathematics, and then specifically relating to your own child.
And going back to economics, is it hard with a lot of schools had ambitions for gleaming sixth form centres or learning campuses, and now with perhaps these things won't happen, does it dampen one's enthusiasm for education?
I think you've got to be pretty resilient as a head teacher these days, and you have to be politically astute. And so when the writing's on the wall, it's not a question of sitting there and waiting for things to happen. You plan. And it's not unusual that these things happen. You simply have to plan for them. And yes, we've been extremely well resourced in the past, since 1997. Now it's no longer going to be the same. And so we've got to plan for that. It's disappointing, of course it's disappointing, as indeed the recession was bitterly disappointing. But people are going to get through that because they're going to plan for that, and they're going to take their upward trend. It's not the end of the world. It's a delaying issue. In other words, buildings that were perhaps previously on the cards, no longer on the cards, will come in the future. You have to remain optimistic.